One of my favorite months in the year is the month of March. This is because we get to celebrate the cultural, the social, economic, and political achievements of women around the world. This year, I have taken it upon myself to celebrate some trailblazing warrior sisters in my community. These women are pressing forward, they are holding their own, and they are women of purpose. International Women's Day has occurred for the last century. The first International Women's Day occurred in 1911. And whilst a lot of things have been achieved, we still have a long way to go. It has been a long and challenging journey. But right now, in 2020, we are still dealing with a lot of inequality in the workplace, in the political world. We still have to deal with child marriages. We are still dealing with genital mutilation. We are still dealing with gender gap in the corporate world. Women are still taking a backseat in the political world. And there's still a lot of patriarchy, a lot of sexism. So how can we go forward? How can we change the narratives as women in the society in Ireland? My name is Abidemi Taiwo, and you are watching On the Couch with Abby. So my first guest today is Adiba Jagadar. She grew up here in Dublin, Ireland. She is an Irish Bangladeshi author and a writer. She has an MA in post-colonial studies and a BA in English. Her debut novel, The Henna Wars, will be published in spring 2020. How are you, Adiba?
I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, I'm great. Thank you so much for coming on the couch with Abby. Thank you for honoring my invite.
Thank you for having me.
Great, so let's get to it. I met you just a couple of weeks at Mother Tongues Festival. And when I met you, obviously I interviewed you. And what I saw was a young, brave, intelligent woman. Obviously with your story. And I really thought, oh my goodness, I have to get you on the couch. So yeah, here we are now. So Adiba, for people out there watching that do not know what you do, would you be able to tell us a bit more about yourself?
Mm-hmm. So I'm originally from Bangladesh, and I moved to Ireland when I was 10 years old. So I've been living here for most of my life, and I've been writing for most of my life as well. So recently I signed a book deal for this book, The Henna Wars. It's a young adult romantic comedy, and it's about two teen girls who have rival henna businesses, and while they're competing, they fall in love.
Interesting. So obviously, with your story, you're changing the narrative of a regular Bangladeshi woman. Would you say?
Hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully. Okay, so in an interview that you had recently, and I'll quote this, you said, when you are marginalized in multiple ways, you feel like nobody wants your story out there and nobody is rooting for you. Do you feel now that you have a voice?
I feel like it's a complicated question. Because I think there are people rooting for me. Obviously, because I've been given a platform to publish a book and to speak and to tell a story. But at the same time, I know that there are also people who still don't want to give me a platform, who still don't want me to tell my story. So I think, there's two sides to the narrative. I think as a marginalized person, even when you do get a platform, there's still a lot of people who they're almost like rooting for you to kind of fail, And I think, there's definitely people who I feel like they're on my side. My agent, for example, my editor, my publishing team, a lot of women of color that I've met in the industry who are also writers. But then I still feel like I will go into some spaces and I won't feel welcome, and I'll feel like I'm kind of shut out of these specific spaces. So I think there's a lot of nuance to it.
Okay. And why do you feel you'll be shut out of the spaces? Is it because you're a woman? Is it because you're Bangladeshi?
I think it's because I'm a woman of color and also because I'm Muslim. Obviously, there's a lot of Islamophobia in the world today.
Absolutely.
So I think there's spaces where being a Muslim person isn't necessarily made to feel welcome.
Yeah.
It's not obviously said outright, but you feel it. And I think also as a woman of color, and I'm sure you feel that too.
Yeah.
There are spaces where, women are celebrated, but if you go there, you can tell that it's for white women and not for women of color. So yeah, those are the kind of the spaces.
Absolutely. Obviously, being a woman, and the whole point of this interview really is in honor of International Women's Day. It is hard being a woman. In this era, it's always been hard, but of course, things are progressing. So now, being an Irish Bangladeshi girl and being an author, how do you feel you can put your voice out there for young girls that are coming behind you?
I think for me, it's important to just keep writing my stories the way that I feel is authentic to me. I think that is my biggest platform, I guess. That is like the opportunity that I have been given. So that, I think for me, that's the most important thing. Especially because I think as a writer, you don't need to tell a single narrative. So for example, in my debut novel, there's a Bangladeshi character called Nishat, and she's a lesbian. But in another story, I can tell the story of a Bangladeshi girl who is not a lesbian, who has a different experience as a Bangladeshi person. So I think, I can use this platform to kind of tell different stories, to give nuance to the perspective of Bangladeshi people.
And obviously, you talking about your character, Nisha. Nisha is the name of the character. She's a lesbian Bangladeshi girl. So how do you think people will accept that kind of story, even from your community? Because I don't know, I could be wrong, but being a lesbian and being a Muslim, that would be a hard sort of combination, wouldn't it? Isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in Bangladesh, it's spoken about in the book as well, but in Bangladesh, it's actually like illegal to be gay. Okay. So if you're gay and somebody or certain people know, you can be killed. Wow. So definitely it is very, very difficult for somebody who is Bangladeshi and who is gay and who is Muslim and who is gay. I think from seeing, I've seen some reviews that people have written. I've seen like enthusiasm from a lot of readers. Obviously this is a young adult novel, so it's aimed at teenagers first and foremost. And I feel like a lot of young people who are queer and who are not necessarily Bangladeshi or necessarily Muslim, but who are like people of color, they have definitely, seem quite enthusiastic about the book. They seem quite excited about it. And that's obviously really important to me because they're the people that I'm writing for. I suppose there probably will be people who are not a fan of the book, who think or who have certain ideas about the book because it's about a Bangladeshi Muslim lesbian. And that's okay. That can't be helped. I think for books like this, there's always going to be racism, homophobia, Islamophobia, and all of that aimed at it. It's nothing that can be helped, but that's more of a reason why we need to be writing these kinds of stories.
Which brings me to this, really. Of course, there's just something special about storytelling. I love storytelling. And when you write stories like this, you will obviously have some people that can resonate with it. So obviously, from what you're saying to me, so you already have a number of people that can resonate with that story.
Yeah, I've heard from a few people who have told me that they can resonate with it. And even before the book I had a book deal, I had a publisher. A lot of my friends are queer people of color. And so they beta read the book for me, and they told me that, they really connected with it. And that meant a lot to me as well, because I think as queer people of color, we don't see ourselves on screen. We don't see ourselves in books. So I'm glad that there's more stories out there about us.
So you are representing.
Yeah, hopefully.
You know what? Before we continue, would you be able to read an excerpt from your book?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I can read a little bit from the first chapter. I decide to come out to my parents at Sunny Apu's engagement party, not because of Sunny Apu and her groom, or the buzz of the wedding in the air, and not because everything about a Bengali wedding is so palpably heterosexual that it's almost nauseating. I decide to come out because of the way Ammu and Abu look at Sunny Apu, with a mixture of pride and love and longing. It isn't directed at Sunny Apu at all, really. It's directed at the future, at our futures, mine and Priti's. I can almost see Ammu and Abu stitching it together in their heads. Castle in the air, made of deep red wedding sari dreams and lined with thick gold wedding jewelry aspirations. I've never thought of my parents as traditionalists before this. I'd seen them as pioneers, people who made things happen, even when those things might seem impossible. They'd broken rigid tradition and have what Bengalis call a love marriage. Though they've never told us a story, I always imagine a movie moment meeting, exactly like in a Bollywood movie. Their eyes meet across a crowded room, maybe at a wedding of distant relatives. Ammu's in a sari, Abu in a sherwani. Suddenly a song starts in the background, something romantic, but upbeat. My parents' love marriage is one of the reasons they work so well here, despite the lack of family and support, without anything, really. They uprooted their lives one day to come to Ireland, to bring us here, to give us a better life, they said, even when in some ways they are stuck to the past, to Bangladesh, to everything Bengali custom tells them. Unfortunately, one of those things is this, a wedding consisting of a bride and a groom. But my Ammu and Abu did make it past the customs that told them love before marriage was unacceptable, and that love after marriage was to be hidden in a locked bedroom like a shameful secret. So maybe, just maybe, they can accept this other form of love that blooms in my chest sometimes when I see Deepika Padukone in a Bollywood movie, and not when I see her male love interest. So that is how I spend Sunny Apu's engagement, trying to construct the perfect coming out moment, and wondering if that even exists. I try to think back to every movie, TV show, and book that I've ever seen or read with gay protagonists, even gay side characters. Each coming out was tragically painful, and they were all white. "What are you doing?" Preeti asks when she spots me typing on my phone in the midst of the engagement ceremony. Everyone's eyes are turned to the bride and groom-to-be, so I thought this was the moment I could Google gay happy endings without someone peering over my shoulder. I quickly slip the phone into my bag and shoot her a wide-eyed innocent smile. Nothing at all. She narrows her eyes like she doesn't believe me, but says no more. She turns back to the bride and groom-to-be. I know Preeti will try to talk me out of it if I tell her what I'm thinking of doing, but I also know I can't be talked out of it now. I can't keep living a lie. I have to tell them at one point or another, and tomorrow is going to be that point. It's weird, but after I've made my decision, I feel like I'm on borrowed time, like this is our last day together and something is about to break open between us. When we're driving home, it's past midnight. The streetlights cast a strange glow on the road ahead, marred by the bright full moon in front of us. It's a clear night for once. Preeti is dozing in the backseat beside me. Ammu and Abu are speaking in a low hum, so I can barely understand what they're saying. I wish I could bottle this uneventful moment, a flash of time when we're all at peace, together and apart at once, and keep it with me forever. I wonder if this is what things will be like tomorrow too, after I've told them. But then the moment's over, and we're home and stumbling out of the car. Our jewelries jingle against each other, sounding too loud and bright in the dead of night quiet on the streets. Inside, I strip my face of all the heavy makeup Preeti carefully dabbed onto it just hours before. I slip out of my itchy, uncomfortable salwar kameez and bury myself in my blankets, where I pull up Google again and translate the word lesbian into Bengali. The next morning, Preeti flits off to her best friend Ali's house with a smile on her lips. She's promised to tell Ali every detail she can about the engagement party and the upcoming wedding, with pictures. There are still a few hours until Abu has to leave for the restaurant, so it's the perfect time, really. I take my time making my morning tea, stirring especially slowly, and going over the words I practiced last night. They seem lackluster and silly now. Ammu, Abu, I have something to tell you, I finally say, trying to breathe normally but somehow forgetting how breathing works. They're sitting at the kitchen table with their phones in their hands. Abu reading the Bengali news and Ammu scrolling through Facebook, so reading the auntie news / Bengali gossip. Yes, Chona, Abu says, not bothering to glance up from his phone. At least my momentary breathing amnesia isn't obvious. I stumble forward, nearly spilling my tea, and somehow make it to the chair at the top of the table. Ammu, Abu, I say again. My voice must sound grave because I finally look up, twin frowns on their lips as they take me in, trembling hands and all. I wish all of a sudden that I'd spoken to Preeti, that I'd allowed her to talk me out of it. I am, after all, only 16 and there's still time. I've never had a girlfriend. I've never even kissed a girl, only dreamed of it while staring at the cracks on my ceiling. But we're already here and my parents are looking at me with expectation in their eyes. There is no turning back. I don't want to turn back. So I say, I like women. Ammu frowns. Okay, that's good, Nishat. You can help your Kala with the wedding. No, I try to remember the word for lesbian in Bengali. I thought I had committed to memory, but clearly not. I wish I'd written it on my hand or something, like a cheat sheet for coming out. You know how Sunny Apu is going to marry Abir Bhaiya? I try again. Ammu and Abu nod, both looking equally bewildered by the turn this conversation is taking. I'm right there with them, if I'm being perfectly honest. Well, I think in the future, I won't want to marry a boy at all. I think I'll want to marry a girl instead, I say lightly. Like this is a thought that just popped into my head, not something I've spent years agonizing over. There's a moment when I'm not sure they understand, but then their eyes widen and I can see realization settling into them. I expect something, anything. Anger, confusion, fear, a mixture of all of those things maybe. But Ammu and Abu turn to each other instead of me, communicating something through their gaze that I don't understand at all. Okay, Ammu says after a beat of silence passes. We understand. You do? Ammu's frown and the chill in her voice suggests anything but understanding. You can go. I stand up, though it feels wrong, like a trap. The mug of tea burns into my skin as I grab hold of it and carry it upstairs. Stealing glances back the whole way up. I'm waiting, hoping for them to call me back. But there's nothing except silence.
Wow. Wow. I'm definitely going to get your book. I cannot wait to read the end of it. So with this book, of course, what I find so interesting is the cheeky humor, if I'm correct. I love that cheeky humor. And you spoke about in your book, obviously, I would imagine that there's a culture to it when it comes to marriage. Could you tell us a bit more about the Bangladeshi culture in terms of marriage?
Yeah, I think in Bangladesh, Bangladeshi culture, there's two main things in Bangladeshi culture. Okay. One of them is food, okay, and the other is weddings, basically. Right. So, for example, every time I go back to Bangladesh, I attend so many weddings that I can't even count them. Wow. And it's this huge culture of weddings. If you have a wedding, you have like hundreds of people attending it. Mm-hmm. My brother's wedding, he got married last year. Mm-hmm. And at his wedding, we were supposed to have 1,000 people. But we didn't because there was an election going on, so people couldn't attend. But if there had been no issues, we would have 1,000 people at the wedding. So weddings are a huge thing in Bangladesh. And so is marriage. There's a lot of pressure to get married. A lot of people still do. They have arranged marriages, though it's very different from, I think, what Westerners think arranged marriages are. It's just being set up for like a marriage, like you would set people up on dates. Exactly, yeah. A little bit different, but that's the basic idea of it. So yeah, weddings are just a huge cultural thing in Bangladesh.
Wow, that sounds like my culture, to be honest. We are so big on weddings and marriages. So I can imagine just a young Bangladeshi girl coming out to her parents and saying she's a lesbian. Oh my goodness. So I would imagine all hell will break loose.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think in Western cultures, that is what would happen. So if you read books with Western people kind of coming out to their parents, it's almost, there's something happens, something immediate. But in this book, nothing actually happens. You see the silence from her parents, and that's really what happens in the book. There's just like silence, because I think when I wrote the book, I imagined I thought about how my parents respond to things. So if you tell them something that they don't want to hear, they just go very silent, and then they just hope it will resolve itself somehow while they're being silent. So I think it's just, I don't know if it's my family's culture or if it's Bangladeshi culture, but to me, that just seemed like the obvious choice to make.
And I felt that from when you read the book. And what I felt, or the what was depicted to me was that they would rather ignore it, they heard, but they want to pretend like it's just not there.
Yeah.
So we'll just block it out and pretend we did not hear that. Interesting. So going forward, who would you say has inspired you? Any female authors out there that has inspired you to write this kind of stories?
I think
authentic stories.
Yeah. The first woman of color author that I read was probably Mallory Blackman. And I read her books when I was a teenager. I think when I was about 14 or 15. I don't know if you've heard of her books. So she has a lot of books. Her most popular novel is Noughts and Crosses, or it's a series, Noughts and Crosses. And actually, the first episode of the TV show came out last night. So yeah. And it's an amazing series. It's basically a world where the races are flipped. So the Noughts are white people who are being discriminated against, and the Crosses are black people who have the power in this world. It's a fantastic series. But it was the first time that I really saw like a woman of color writing, and I was just so inspired by her writing is amazing as well. I was inspired by seeing her actually writing, and also by the books that she was writing. So Mallory Blackman is definitely somebody that I really, really look up to. There's also Melinda Lowe. So she's the first time that I saw a queer like person on the page, and she's an Asian author as well. So I think discovering her, it was like such a surprise because I didn't know before. It sounds really ridiculous, but I didn't know before that like Asian people could be queer, because you never see them anywhere.
No, you don't.
Yeah. So the two of them were definitely very inspirational. I also love Edwidge Danticat. She's written a lot of brilliant books. So she's a Haitian Canadian writer, I believe, and she's fantastic. I just love her writing, and she writes a lot about Haiti, about like the political tensions in the Caribbean. She writes historical novels, but also a lot of contemporary stuff. Her writing is just brilliant. And more recently, I think a lot of my friends who are also authors, who I've gotten to know and they have books out, they've been very inspirational for me too. So for example, one of my friends, Frida Abike Iyemide, she has a book coming out next year called Ace of Spades. And she helps me with like so much of my writing. And definitely just knowing these women and reading their amazing books where they talk about like all of these different things, but they're also just brilliant writers, I think definitely helps me with my own writing.
Great. So what kind of change would you like to see if you had the chance to pick or to decide the kind of world that we live in today? What would you like to see? What is the change you would like to see, Adiba?
In the entire world.
In the entire world.
It's a difficult question.
Well, in terms of women equality.
I think what I would really like to see is, I would like to see a change in the feminist movement as we know it. Because I feel like a lot of the feminist movement, we're very comfortable with where we are. And I feel like sometimes we don't challenge ourselves enough.
Okay.
So in terms of inclusivity, I feel like in Ireland, for example, a lot of events that I will go to for women, they will kind of do a disclaimer where they'll say, of course, we're intersectional. And it seems to me that it's almost like a buzzword rather than actually being intersectional and being kind of inclusive. So what I would really love to see is women of color, trans women, disabled women, all of these women who are marginalized to be given the spaces that they deserve to actually feel included in feminism as a whole, because I think right now, the way the feminist movement is, a lot of women who are marginalized don't feel included.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, well, I guess we still have a lot of work to do because we do have a lot of, passionate feminists out there. But hearing your point of view, definitely there's a lot of work to be done. Well, thank you, Adiba, for coming on the couch with Abby, for gracing us with your presence, and for reading a part of your book to us. You guys, you need to get the Henna Wars. It comes out, it's going to be published
in May.
In May 2020. And could you tell us, actually, Adiba, where can we find your book?
So you can find it online. You can find it on Amazon, the Book Depository. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
So that is Adiba, such an interesting guest of mine, and I look forward to hearing what other ladies have to say.